Hello and welcome to this another Docker tutorial series. So far we have learned about basic operations on the image itself and the container, how to start the container and all, and how you can use it and process the data as well. So that these commands are sufficient most of the time to just get started with any of the software, any of the application that you want. It could be MongoDB, it could be another database, or it could be anything else that you want. As long as it's available on any of the Docker Hub or anything anywhere else, you can use it on your machine, and it will be run. It will run in an isolated process. It will not be installed as a local software on your operating system. Now, even though those commands are sufficient, but once you get started with the Docker and you start using it in daily life, there are some commands that you should know about to manage your dockers correctly, especially when you don't know who is actually let's say you're running 10 or 20 containers on your machine, and it's very normal. Most of the time you don't need them, that many containers, but on production environment at least it's very normal to run 10, 15 or 20 containers even, right? Most of them could be replicas of the same container, so that even though, let's say, you can run 5 different MongoDB instances, 5 different containers. So even though one of them fails, the other 4 are running, something like that. Okay. So how to actually know which one is failing? How to actually know which one is taking what uh, space and memory and all? So there are a few useful commands that I'm gonna talk about. Major, no, namely like Docker exec, logs, stats, and top. So we'll learn about these commands to they're gonna help you manage the containers and to know more about them. Right. The first command that I'm gonna show you is Docker exec. Now let's say you have a container running like this. So if I run Docker ps, this is the container ID. Let me just zoom out a bit. Okay. So this is the container ID. I have MongoDB running and blah blah blah. You know that I can connect with it. It's a MongoDB install that we created in the previous video. Okay. Now, how to actually, what if I want to go inside this container and run the command, run some command? Let's say I want to go inside the Docker database inside this container. Remember, it's an application itself. It is definitely running on top of some OS and on top of some libraries and all. So I can basically log in inside this container and I can run any command that I want, just like I would run them in my OS. Okay. So to log in into this container, there is a command called as docker exec. The docker exec command, it's in the name, like execute something. It lets you execute something inside this container. So whatever you are running here is on your OS, right? So what if you want to run something inside the MongoDB? For that, you would give this command docker exec. Now, what you want to run? We want to run. Let's say we want to drop in into a shell. You can just run something like rf to delete something, or touch to create some file, or mkdir to create a directory, or any command that you want. If you want to persist the connection, you can just launch a instance of a shell like a bash, and you will actually land in that shell, and that shell you can keep on running. Inside that shell you can keep on running more commands on top of it. So whichever command you want, you can just run one command, like I said, like this, or you can just launch a shell like this. So what we want to launch, a bash shell. Okay. So but just like we gave the the interactive TTY for Docker run, we can give that IT here as well, and this will give me an interactive pseudo terminal, we call it. But don't we're not gonna care about it that much at this point. So what you need to give is, you need to tell Docker that I need one interactive terminal, one interactive TTY on this container. Now, which container? You just need to give the name of the container. So docker exec interactive on this container, and which program that you want. So it's pretty straightforward. If I press enter, this will take me inside the container. Now I am currently inside the container. You see the prompt has been changed. This was my prompt, and now I'm at root at the rate something something. Now this is just exactly your container's ID. Okay, so I'm inside the MongoDB container now. Whatever the commands that I'm gonna run, are actually I'm running inside the Docker now, inside this MongoDB. Now, most of the time you would, if you are installing a database, in this case, let's say MongoDB or Postgres, most of the time you'll also get the tools to connect with them inside containers as well. So just like this. Now the command that I run Mongo was again inside from the Mongo container. I'm connecting to MongoDB internally, right? And all the all the other commands that I would run with Mongo shell are the exact same command. There is nothing changes there, right? So I can check like the current operating system. I can check the root version, sorry, the username or any other command that you want to run. This is mostly helpful to see if the container is running properly, to see the if it is persisting the data, if the ports are open, something like that. Okay, so just remember that you can, if you ever want to launch inside the container, you would use the docker command. And if you are, once you are done with the configuration and changes and any other thing that you want to run inside, you would just run exec and you will be back on your original shell, your operating system shell. Okay, so like this, if I run just ls, what it's gonna do is it's gonna run ls inside. Okay, if you don't want an interactive terminal like this, you would just run the command that you want to run. It will run that command inside container and jump back out of the container like this. So that helps for executing some commands inside it. What if I want to check if the container itself is running fine or not? So there are few commands for that. You can use the first one I'm going to talk about is the logs command. So I want to check the logs. Most of the time, the error is always solved by the logs itself, right? By reading the logs, you will get the idea if it is working fine or not. So for that, what I can do is there is a pretty straightforward command called as docker logs. Uh, of course, we need to give it a container name because it cannot collect logs of each and every container like that. So docker logs, and if I give the container name, this command will give me the logs that were given by the MongoDB container, right? Like this. So these are unreadable, but still, these are the logs of the MongoDB instance, and you can read through them, see if everything is working fine or not. The most common use cases of logs is like this. So for the you'll give them a command called as follow, and you can also decide like how many number of lines at the end you want. So tail, remember this is not the ending lines. So if you give it like this, docker logs -n, let's say 10, it will just give you the MongoDB. It will just give you the last 10 lines of the log. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Okay, so these are the last 10 lines so that you don't have to run, you don't have to see the entire log like this. This is very huge. You may not even need the entire log most of the time, right? So you can use the docker n. Okay, I'll just type it, docker logs -n, and number of lines that you want at the tail, and then the container name. And of course, there is one more useful command for this is called as -f, stands for follow. So it will follow the logs. It will not close the terminal immediately. So it will keep reading the logs and it will keep printing out. If I run the command for -n, any number of last lines, and -n for follow, I'll read the logs and I'll keep on reading the logs like this. So if I go into another terminal, let's say, if I run, let's say, so I'll dive, I'll go. Okay, I'm launching into Mongo shell to connect the same database. You see, now as soon as I connected this database, there was a new log. What does the log says? If you read it very carefully, on the overall it looks unreadable, but it's actually, if you are familiar with the reading logs and all, you'll get an idea like how to read the logs and all. So first thing is like date and timestamp. You can skip it, where it occurred, what is the log ID and all. But this is the message part. Connection accepted, and from where it accepted the connection and ID and all those things. So this is the part that I know that connection was successful with the container, right? From where the connection was, and all the other things are there also. If you want to know more about them, if I just press enter and clear the screen for me, I can just, let's say, use students again. So collections, okay, db dot users dot, let's say, insert one. I'm going to give it a dummy name. Okay, so I inserted one object in the students database. Now you see there should be another log line for that, and the log message says white tiger message attribute saving checkpoint snapshot and all. Okay, so it was able to save the database, save the my user into the database. So this way you can keep on reading the logs and see at what point what thing goes wrong. This is most of the time helpful when you first, this will be the first step of debugging any container. Like you're gonna check the logs and see if everything is going right or wrong, right? And then if the logs are not correct, then you can actually log in into the container and check the with Docker exec and check what other things you can debug with it. Okay, so Docker exec and Docker logs are the one of the two basic commands. The other one I'm going to talk about is the Docker stats itself. Now this is fine uh, for checking the containers, one container and its information, right? With what if you have like multiple containers running and you don't know which one is taking how much RAM, how much processes and all. If you want to know that, there is a command called as Docker stats. It doesn't take any attribute. It takes, but you don't need to give it any attribute on the overall level. If you just run this command Docker stats, it's gonna give you stats of all the containers like this. So I currently only have one container, so it's telling me that one container Mongo it's taking 0.30% of the CPU, so it's not that much. I told you these are very lightweight containers. It's taking only 300 MB of RAM out of 12 GB that is available for this container, and it's taking only 1% of the memory, right? How much network it is communicating to, blocks it is sending, and what is the current process ID of this container. So all this information of all the container will be available to you. With this, you'll be able to know that how much uh, processes and how much resources this container is using, or any other container. You'll get a list of all the containers here. If you want to just stop the stats, you can just press Control C and you'll get out of it. Now this is almost same as the other command called as Docker top, but what Docker top gives you is it tells you the processes that are running inside the container. The difference between the stats is stats are for all the containers like this. Okay, it's gonna list you the usage and all the resource allocation of all the containers itself. The Docker top command will tell you the resource allocation inside one specific container. So Docker top, let's say MongoDB, if I run this, it's gonna tell me how many processes are running inside MongoDB. Okay, like this. So currently it's telling me that there is a there is a process ID like this. Let me zoom out a bit. Maybe that will be readable. Okay, it's a lot smaller, but I hope you can read this. There is a one process running in the entire Docker container called as MongoD, stands for Mongo daemon, and bind IP all, it's the argument for that. So this is the only one command that is running at the moment. You can give many arguments to this to get the list of all the OS threads and all those things, but overall this will give you the idea of what is running inside a container. Okay, and you can then check how many RAM it is taking and all, or you want to stop some process and all, you can do that. Okay, so these are the basic commands that you can interact with the Docker. You can check what thing is going right or wrong, and based on the logs, or you can execute the commands and stats. You can stop the containers and all. Hope you understand the video. In the next video, we are going to learn about how you can create your own containers, or how you can distribute your own application like Express or React app inside the Docker, and you'll be able to dispatch them. You'll be able to give them to the let's say other developers, and they'll be able to run the same application without any headache. Okay, thank you for joining. I'll see you guys next time.